That old card probably stopped working before I married your son, my daughter-in-law said with a laugh loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. A few people nearby turned their heads. Some smiled awkwardly. Others pretended not to listen. I simply looked down at the black card resting beside my dinner plate and folded my hands in my lap. Looking back now, that was the moment everything began to unravel. My name is Helen Crawford. I am 72 years old, and until that evening, I believed I understood exactly who the people around me were. I was wrong. If you're listening to my story, stay with me until the end. Sometimes the truth hides in the smallest moments, and sometimes a single sentence can reveal more about a person than years of polite conversation ever could. The restaurant was one of the most expensive places in downtown Chicago. White tablecloths covered every table. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished marble floors. The kind of place where a simple steak dinner could cost more than my first monthly mortgage payment decades ago. It wasn't the sort of place I usually visited. In fact, I had suggested somewhere much simpler. A quiet family restaurant. A place where people could hear one another speak. But Vanessa had insisted. She always insisted. It's a special occasion, she had said. Let's do something classy for once. For once. The words had stung more than I admitted. Across the table sat my son, Andrew, 44 years old. Successful. Hardworking. The same little boy who used to run into my arms after school, carrying crumpled drawings and spelling tests. Tonight, he barely looked at me. His attention remained fixed on his phone or on Vanessa. Every time I tried to start a conversation, it seemed to fade away before it could begin. That had become normal over the past few years. Ever since Rose passed away, things felt different. Quieter. Colder. My wife had always been the bridge between people. She knew how to make everyone feel welcome. She knew how to smooth over disagreements before they became wounds. 3 years had passed since we lost her, but some days it still felt impossible to accept. I could still hear her laughter in certain rooms of the house. Still catch myself reaching for a second coffee mug in the morning before remembering there was no one there to drink from it. The waiter arrived carrying dessert menus. Vanessa waved him away without looking. "We'll see those later," she said. Then she glanced toward me. "Assuming we're not having payment issues." Andrew chuckled softly. Not because the joke was funny, because it was easier than disagreeing with her. I felt something tighten inside my chest. Not anger, not even sadness, just disappointment. The kind that arrives slowly after years of watching someone reveal who they really are. Vanessa smiled as she lifted her wine glass. "Honestly, Helen, I don't know why you still carry that thing around." She nodded toward the black card beside my purse. "It looks ancient." "It works fine," I replied. "I'm sure it does," she said. "For collecting dust." More laughter. More uncomfortable smiles from nearby tables. I noticed Andrew staring at his water glass. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell her to stop. He simply remained silent. That hurt more than her words. Then something unexpected happened. A man standing near the hostess station froze. He had been speaking to an employee only moments earlier. Now his eyes were fixed on the card. His expression changed instantly. The color drained from his face. He whispered something to another employee and began walking toward our table. Slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a situation they didn't fully understand. Vanessa noticed him first. "Looks like someone finally realized we're ready for service," she said with a smirk. But the man wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at Andrew. His eyes never left the black card. When he reached our table, he stopped. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he looked directly at me. "Mrs. Crawford," he said quietly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" I frowned. "Of course." He swallowed hard. "Privately, if possible." And that was when I realized the card Rose had given me years ago might not be what I thought it was. For a moment, nobody spoke. The sounds of the restaurant seemed distant, as if someone had lowered the volume on the entire room. James Thornton stood beside our table waiting patiently, his posture respectful but tense. Vanessa glanced at Andrew with an amused smile. She clearly believed this was some kind of misunderstanding. Andrew looked equally confused. I picked up my purse and rose slowly from my chair. "It will only take a minute," James said. "Whenever you are ready." I followed him across the dining room. As we walked, I noticed employees watching us from behind the reception desk. Their expressions were strange. Not curious. Not annoyed. Concerned. James led me through a set of double doors, and into a private lounge decorated with dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The room felt quiet and insulated from the noise outside. He gestured toward a leather chair. "Please, have a seat." I sat down carefully. James remained standing for several seconds before speaking. "Mrs. Crawford, may I ask where you obtained that card?" I frowned. "My wife gave it to me years ago." His eyes widened slightly. "Rose Crawford." Hearing her name spoken by a stranger caught me off guard. "Yes." James slowly lowered himself into the chair across from me. "I apologize if this seems unusual, but I need to verify something." He pulled out a tablet and entered several pieces of information. The room became silent except for the soft tapping of his fingers against the screen. After nearly a minute, he stopped typing. The color drained from his face again. He looked at me as though he had just discovered something impossible. "Mrs. Crawford, did your wife ever explain what this card represented?" I shook my head. "Not really. Rose was private about many things. She simply told me to keep it safe." James leaned back and released a slow breath. "That explains a lot." I stared at him. What exactly is going on? Before answering, he asked another question. "How long ago did Mrs. Crawford pass away?" 3 years. His expression softened. "I am sorry for your loss." I thanked him quietly. Even after all that time, those words still carried weight. James glanced toward the closed door before lowering his voice. "Mrs. Crawford, this card is not an ordinary credit card." I almost laughed. "I assumed that much from your reaction." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Fair enough." He turned the tablet toward me. The screen displayed a company name I did not recognize. Beneath it appeared several financial institutions and organizations connected by charts and ownership records. Most of it meant very little to me. "I am afraid I do not understand any of this," I admitted. "Neither did I when I first encountered it years ago," he replied. "The reason I recognized the card is because our restaurant belongs to a hospitality group partially owned by one of these organizations." He pointed toward the screen. "Only a handful of people in the country possess access credentials linked to this network." I stared at him. "Access credentials? That card serves multiple purposes. Payment is only one of them." My confusion deepened. Rose had always driven modest cars. She preferred comfortable clothes. She clipped coupons even when she did not need to. Nothing about her lifestyle suggested secrets of this magnitude. James folded his hands together. "Mrs. Crawford, I believe someone needs to be notified that the card has become active again." "Active again?" He nodded. "According to the records I can access, it has not been used in several years." I immediately understood why. The last person who regularly carried it had been Rose. James reached for his phone. "There is someone who should speak with you personally." I looked through the window toward the city lights beginning to glow against the evening sky. For the first time since Rose passed away, I felt as though I was standing at the edge of a door she had closed behind her long ago. And somehow, without warning, that door had just begun to open. James stepped out of the room to make his call, leaving me alone with questions that seemed to multiply by the second. I sat quietly in the leather chair and stared at the city beyond the glass. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of gold and blue. Rose always loved sunsets. She used to stop whatever she was doing just to watch the colors change. I could almost hear her voice telling me not to worry until I knew the whole story. That had always been her way. While other people rushed toward conclusions, Rose preferred patience. Looking back, I realized how many things about her I had accepted without ever fully understanding. She traveled occasionally for business, but she rarely discussed details. She received phone calls from people around the country, yet she never spoke about their importance. Whenever I asked questions, she would smile and say, "One day, if you need to know, you will know." At the time, I thought she was simply being mysterious. Now I wondered if she had been protecting me from responsibilities I never wanted. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. The door opened, and James returned. He looked more composed than before, but there was still tension in his expression. "Someone is on the way," he said. "Who?" I asked. "A gentleman named William Harper." The name meant nothing to me. James seemed surprised. "You have never met him?" I shook my head. "Not that I remember." He sat across from me again. "Mrs. Crawford, William Harper is one of the most respected financial executives in the country. He does not usually leave meetings for anyone." "Then why is he coming here?" James hesitated. "Because of your wife." The answer only deepened my confusion. Before I could ask another question, there was movement outside the lounge. Several employees straightened immediately. One woman near the hallway almost dropped the folder she was carrying. Moments later, the door opened again. An older man entered wearing a navy suit and a silver tie. His hair was completely white, and he carried himself with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to responsibility. The moment he saw me, his expression softened. "Helen Crawford," he said quietly. "It has been far too long." I stared at him. "I am sorry, but have we met?" A faint smile appeared on his face. "Only once. Nearly 15 years ago. Rose introduced us at a charity event. You spent most of the evening talking with a retired schoolteacher instead of the executives in the room." Something about the memory suddenly surfaced. A crowded ballroom. Rose in a dark blue dress. A polite gentleman thanking volunteers. "William?" I asked. He nodded. "The very same." He approached and shook my hand warmly. "Your wife spoke about you often." Those words caught me off guard. Rose had always been proud of our life together, but hearing that from a stranger made my throat tighten. William sat down across from me. For several seconds, he studied my face with genuine sadness. "I was deeply sorry to hear about Rose," he said. "She was one of the finest people I have ever known." "Thank you," I replied softly. He glanced toward the black card resting on the table beside me. When James called, I suspected there could only be one explanation. "Which is?" I asked. William folded his hands. "Helen, there are things about Rose's professional life that she deliberately kept private. She believed success should create opportunities, not attention. Very few people knew the full extent of what she built." My heartbeat quickened. "Built?" William nodded slowly. "Your wife was not simply involved in those companies. She helped create them." The room suddenly felt smaller. Every ordinary memory I had of Rose seemed to shift beneath my feet. The woman who clipped grocery coupons. The woman who drove the same car for 8 years. The woman who spent Saturday mornings planting flowers in the backyard. Somehow, she had been carrying an entire world I never knew existed. And judging by the look in William Harper's eyes, I had only begun to discover it. For several moments, I could not find the words to respond. William remained patient, allowing the silence to settle naturally between us. That was another trait he seemed to share with Rose. Neither of them rushed conversations simply because silence made other people uncomfortable. I looked down at my hands and tried to reconcile the woman I had known for more than 40 years with the picture slowly emerging in front of me. Rose had always been intelligent. That much was obvious. She could solve problems that left other people frustrated for days. She could walk into a room full of strangers and somehow leave with everyone feeling heard and respected. But none of that explained what William was describing. Why would she hide all of this? I finally asked. William smiled softly. Because she knew exactly what money does to people. The answer landed harder than I expected. He leaned back in his chair and glanced toward the window. Years ago, when the company was growing, people treated Rose very differently after they learned what she had accomplished. Some became overly friendly. Some became demanding. Some stopped seeing her as a person altogether. I thought immediately of Vanessa. The uncomfortable realization made my stomach tighten. William continued. Your wife valued authenticity above almost everything else. She once told me that the only way to know who truly cared about you was to remove every incentive except affection. That sounded exactly like Rose. I remembered countless weekends spent in our modest suburban home. The flower beds she tended every spring. The handwritten birthday cards she mailed to relatives. The way she volunteered quietly without ever seeking recognition. Not once did she seem interested in impressing anyone. Now I was beginning to understand why. She already knew who she was. She never needed validation from strangers. William opened a thin leather portfolio he had brought with him. Inside were several documents neatly organized into sections. He removed a single photograph and slid it across the table toward me. My breath caught immediately. The picture showed Rose standing beside William and several other people in front of a newly completed office building. A large ribbon stretched across the entrance. Everyone was smiling. Everyone looked proud. Rose appeared younger, but unmistakably herself. That was taken 22 years ago, William said. The opening day of our headquarters. I stared at the photograph. She never showed me this. No, he replied gently. She would not have. He reached into the folder again and removed another document. This time it appeared to be a letter. My eyes immediately recognized the handwriting. Even after 3 years, I would have known it anywhere. Rose's handwriting had always been elegant and deliberate. Suddenly, emotions I had managed to contain all evening threatened to rise to the surface. William noticed immediately. "She left instructions," he said quietly. "Specific instructions. If that card was ever activated after her passing, I was to meet with you personally." I looked up. She planned for this? Very carefully. My heart began beating faster. Not from fear. From curiosity. From the strange feeling that Rose was somehow still guiding events long after she was gone. William rested his hand on the envelope, but did not give it to me yet. "There are things you deserve to know, Helen. Important things. But before we discuss any of them, there is something else you should understand." His expression grew more serious. "Over the past year, several inquiries have been made regarding assets connected to Rose's estate." I frowned. "What kind of inquiries?" He held my gaze. "Most were routine. A few were not." The room suddenly felt colder. William did not seem alarmed, but he did seem concerned. "Someone has been asking questions they should not have been asking." My mind immediately returned to countless small moments from the past year. Casual comments. Unexpected questions. Conversations that had seemed harmless at the time. For the first time, I began to wonder whether they had been harmless at all. William's words lingered in the air long after he stopped speaking. Someone had been asking questions. Someone had been digging into matters that Rose had intentionally kept private. I sat quietly, trying to process everything I had learned during the past hour. It felt impossible that a simple family dinner had led me here. Earlier that evening, my biggest concern had been enduring another uncomfortable conversation with Vanessa. Now I was discovering an entire side of my wife's life that had remained hidden for decades. "Who was making the inquiries?" I asked. William did not answer immediately. Instead, he opened the portfolio once more and reviewed several pages. His caution told me the answer mattered. Finally, he looked up. The requests came through different channels, different attorneys, different financial consultants. On the surface, they appeared unrelated. But they were connected? I asked. He nodded. Eventually, our compliance team noticed a pattern. A chill ran through me. "What kind of pattern?" William folded his hands. "Every inquiry focused on assets connected to you." I blinked. "Me? Yes." That surprised me more than anything else. I had never considered myself wealthy. Comfortable, perhaps. Stable. Rose and I had built a good life together, but nothing extravagant. We lived in the same house for years. We took modest vacations. We donated quietly to local charities. "I do not understand," I admitted. William's expression softened. "That is because Rose designed it that way." He paused. "Helen, your wife spent years creating structures that protected both her business interests and the people she loved. Most of those protections remain in place today." My thoughts drifted backward through the previous year. Small moments that had seemed insignificant suddenly returned with startling clarity. Vanessa asking whether I planned to update my estate documents. Vanessa casually wondering whether I had access to certain accounts. Vanessa suggesting several times that maintaining my house alone was becoming difficult. At the time, each comment had sounded reasonable. Concerned, even. Now they felt different. Calculated. I remembered a Sunday afternoon 6 months earlier. Vanessa had arrived carrying coffee and pastries. She spent nearly an hour discussing retirement communities. Not because I had asked, because she insisted I should consider my future. When I politely declined, disappointment flashed across her face before she quickly covered it with a smile. Another memory followed. A family barbecue during the summer. Vanessa had asked whether Rose left detailed financial records. The question felt strange at the time. Andrew had changed the subject before I could answer. I never thought about it again. Until now. William seemed to notice the realization spreading across my face. "You are remembering things," he said quietly. I nodded. "Maybe." He leaned forward slightly. "Helen, I want to be very careful here. Suspicion is not proof. Questions are not crimes. But when certain patterns emerge, responsible people pay attention." I appreciated his restraint. He was not trying to influence my conclusions. He was simply presenting facts. That made me trust him even more. A gentle knock interrupted us. James stepped into the room carrying a tray with tea and bottled water. He set everything down and quietly excused himself. As the door closed again, William slid the envelope with Rose's handwriting across the table. My eyes immediately fixed on my name written on the front. Helen. Just that. Nothing else. Seeing her handwriting after all this time felt like hearing her voice from another room. She instructed me to give this to you only under very specific circumstances, Williams said. My fingers rested lightly on the envelope. I had this strange feeling that whatever waited inside would change everything once again. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the envelope. For a moment, I simply stared at it. 3 years had passed since Rose's handwriting had appeared anywhere in my life. I had saved old birthday cards and anniversary notes, but this felt different. This was not a memory. This was a message deliberately left behind. William remained silent while I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded letter. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Dear Helen, if you are reading this, then something happened that convinced you to use the card. First, do not panic. Second, trust William. Third, remember that appearances are rarely the truth. I smiled despite myself. That sounded exactly like Rose. Practical, calm, direct. I continued reading. There may come a day when people show unusual interest in things that never interested them before. If that day arrives, pay attention. Do not argue. Do not defend yourself. Simply watch. People reveal their character when they believe they are close to getting something they want. My smile faded. Every sentence seemed connected to conversations I had experienced during the past year. Questions about my finances. Questions about the house. Questions about legal documents. Questions that once seemed harmless. Suddenly, they felt very different. The letter continued. I spent years building systems designed to protect the people I love. Some protections are financial. Others are personal. The most important protection is time. Time allows truth to reveal itself. If you are reading this, then enough time has passed. I paused and looked at William. He nodded gently, encouraging me to continue. My chest felt tight as I read the next paragraph. You may discover things about my work that surprise you. Please do not let those discoveries change the way you remember our life together. The happiest moments of my life were never board meetings or business deals. They were Saturday mornings in the garden, long drives through the countryside, and quiet evenings spent with you. Tears blurred my vision for a moment. I lowered the letter and took a slow breath. Of all the astonishing things I had learned that evening, that paragraph felt the most important. Rose was still Rose. The woman described by William and the woman I had loved were the same person. She had simply carried responsibilities I never fully understood. I wiped my eyes and continued reading. Near the end of the letter, the tone shifted slightly. One final thing. If someone begins pushing you toward decisions that benefit them more than they benefit you, do not ignore it. Listen carefully, observe quietly, and remember that kindness and wisdom are not the same thing. You have always been kind. Now it is time to be wise. The letter ended with 3 simple words. I love you. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. The room remained silent. William waited respectfully before speaking. She knew people better than almost anyone I have ever met. I nodded slowly. I think she knew something was coming. William's expression grew serious. Perhaps not something specific, but she understood human nature. He opened the portfolio again and removed several documents. There is more you need to see. As he arranged the papers across the table, I noticed familiar names appearing again and again. Attorneys, financial advisors, consultants, dates stretching back nearly a year. My eyes stopped on one name in particular, a name I recognized immediately, Vanessa Crawford. And suddenly, many of the questions Rose had warned me about no longer felt hypothetical. For several seconds, I simply stared at the page. Vanessa's name appeared multiple times throughout the documents. Not once, not twice, repeatedly. Different dates, different requests, different firms. None of them illegal, none of them dramatic. Yet taken together, they painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. William remained calm as he organized the papers into a neat stack. Most people stop after receiving basic information, he said. These inquiries continued long after the answers should have satisfied normal curiosity. I looked down at the dates again. Some stretched back nearly 11 months. That realization unsettled me more than anything else. While I had been attending family dinners, celebrating birthdays, and trying to maintain peace, someone had been quietly gathering information behind the scenes. Did Andrew know? I asked. William chose his words carefully. I do not know. The answer felt honest. That mattered. He was not trying to convince me of anything. He was simply presenting facts. I appreciated that. My eyes moved across another document. One entry referenced my home. Another mentioned estate planning. Another involved trust structures connected to assets I had only learned about an hour earlier. Suddenly, conversations from the past year returned with startling clarity. Vanessa asking whether I planned to renovate the house. Vanessa suggesting that large homes were difficult for older people to maintain. Vanessa mentioning how wonderful it would be for future grandchildren to have more space someday. At the time, those comments sounded thoughtful, caring, even. Now I saw them differently. Not because the words themselves were suspicious, but because of their timing. Because of the pattern. Rose had warned me about patterns. I remembered another afternoon from several months earlier. Vanessa had offered to help organize my financial records. She insisted she was only trying to make things easier for me. When I declined, she seemed disappointed. Not angry, just disappointed. I never understood why. Perhaps now I was beginning to. William slid another folder toward me. There is one thing you should understand. I looked up. What is that? No matter what conclusions you eventually reach, do not make them tonight. I frowned slightly. Why? Because emotions create shortcuts, and shortcuts often lead to mistakes. The advice sounded exactly like something Rose would have said. I nodded slowly. You think there is more to learn? I know there is. He folded his hands. The reason I came here personally is not because of the card itself. It is because certain protections attached to your wife's estate were activated the moment that card was used. My pulse quickened. Protections? William nodded. Monitoring systems. Notification procedures. Review requirements. I stared at him. The complexity of everything was difficult to comprehend. Rose had planned so far ahead that even years after her passing, events were still unfolding according to instructions she had left behind. What happens now? I asked quietly. William glanced toward the closed lounge door. A faint smile touched his face. Now we find out who people really are. At that exact moment, the door opened. James stepped inside and approached us. His expression was polite but uneasy. I apologize for interrupting, he said. But there is a situation in the dining room. William raised an eyebrow. What kind of situation? James hesitated. Mrs. Crawford's daughter-in-law is demanding answers, and she seems very interested in why everyone keeps asking about the black card. James's words did not surprise me as much as they should have. In fact, after everything I had learned that evening, they felt almost inevitable. William exchanged a brief glance with James before standing. His expression remained calm. Thank you, he said. Please let her know Mrs. Crawford will return shortly. James nodded and quietly left the room. The door closed behind him. Silence settled over us once again. I looked at William. She is impatient. A faint smile appeared on his face. People usually become impatient when they think answers are close. I thought about that for a moment. Then I carefully placed Rose's letter back into the envelope and slipped it into my purse. Somehow, holding it made me feel stronger. Not because of money. Not because of secrets. Because it reminded me who Rose had been. She never reacted emotionally when patience would reveal more. She never rushed toward confrontation when observation could accomplish more. I stood slowly from my chair. I think I am ready to go back. William nodded. Good. He gathered the documents into the portfolio and closed it securely. Remember what Rose wrote. I smiled faintly. Observe. Exactly. We walked together through the hallway toward the dining room. As soon as we emerged from the private area, I noticed the atmosphere had changed. Conversations had become quieter. Several employees were watching our table without trying to make it obvious. Vanessa was standing beside her chair with her arms crossed. Andrew remained seated, though he looked increasingly uncomfortable. The moment Vanessa saw William walking beside me, her eyes widened. She immediately straightened her posture. There you are, she said. Her voice carried farther than necessary. What exactly is going on? I took my seat without answering immediately. William remained standing nearby. Vanessa looked from him to me and back again. Who is this? She asked. My name is William Harper, he replied politely. The reaction was immediate. Vanessa recognized the name. I saw it happen in real time. The confidence on her face flickered for just a second before returning. But I noticed. And once I noticed, I could not stop noticing. Every expression, every hesitation, every carefully chosen word. William Harper? She repeated. The William Harper? He smiled politely. There is only one that I know of. Vanessa laughed nervously. Well, This is certainly unexpected. Andrew finally spoke. Mom, what is happening? His voice sounded genuinely confused. I looked at my son and felt a wave of sadness. Not anger. Sadness. He seemed completely unaware of the currents moving beneath the surface of his own life. Before I could answer, William spoke calmly. Your mother and I were discussing matters connected to Rose Crawford. Vanessa immediately leaned forward. What kind of matters? There it was again. That eagerness. That intense interest. William did not answer her question directly. Instead, he looked at Andrew. Your mother has been the beneficiary of several protections established years ago. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. Protections? William nodded. Your wife planned carefully. The table fell silent. Nearby diners pretended not to listen while clearly listening to every word. Vanessa forced a smile. I always knew Rose was smart. William met her gaze calmly. Smart enough to understand that character reveals itself over time. For the first time all evening, Vanessa had no immediate response. The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. Then William reached into his jacket and placed a sealed envelope on the table in front of me. My name was written across the front in Rose's handwriting. The moment Vanessa saw it, the color drained from her face. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The envelope sat on the table between us like a message from another world. Vanessa stared at it so intensely that she seemed to forget everyone else was present. Andrew looked from the envelope to me, then to William, completely lost. I understood the feeling. Just a few hours earlier, I had been equally confused. Slowly, I picked up the envelope. My fingers traced the familiar handwriting. Even now, seeing my name written by Rose felt deeply personal. William remained silent. He was giving me space to decide what happened next. That, I realized, was exactly what Rose had intended. Not control. Not manipulation. Choice. I looked around the table. At my son. At my daughter-in-law. At the people quietly pretending not to watch from nearby tables. Then I placed the envelope gently into my purse without opening it. Vanessa blinked. You are not going to read it? She asked before she could stop herself. The question slipped out too quickly. Too eagerly. I met her eyes. Not tonight. For the first time all evening, she seemed genuinely unsettled. William smiled faintly. He understood my decision immediately. Some truths did not need to be rushed. Some lessons arrived more powerfully when people had time to sit with uncertainty. Andrew leaned forward. Mom, can somebody please explain what is happening? His voice carried frustration, but also concern. Real concern. I reached across the table and rested my hand on his. I think we all have some things to learn, I said softly. He looked at me for several seconds before nodding. Then William spoke. Your mother is correct. He stood and adjusted his jacket. There will be meetings in the coming weeks. Information will be shared through the proper channels. Everything will be handled professionally. Vanessa immediately focused on one word. Information? She asked. William looked at her calmly. Information that Rose intended to be revealed only when the time was right. The color in Vanessa's face faded again. I noticed. So did everyone else. Yet I felt no satisfaction. No desire to embarrass her. Rose's letter had changed something inside me. I finally understood what she had spent years trying to protect. It was never simply money. Money had only been a tool. What she truly protected was dignity, independence, the ability to make choices without pressure from people seeking something in return. We finished dinner quietly after that. The jokes stopped. The comments stopped. Even the atmosphere seemed different. When the bill arrived, James personally delivered it. Then he smiled and gently removed it from the table. Tonight is taken care of, he said. On behalf of those who never forgot Rose Crawford. My throat tightened, not because of the gesture itself, but because of what it represented. Respect earned over a lifetime. Respect that could not be purchased. As we prepared to leave, William shook my hand. Your wife was extraordinary, he said. Yes, I replied. She was. Outside, the Chicago air felt cool and fresh. The city lights reflected against the glass towers around us. Andrew walked beside me in silence. Vanessa followed several steps behind. For once, she had nothing to say. I looked up at the night sky and thought about Rose. People believed the story was about a card, or hidden wealth, or business empires. They were wrong. The real story was much simpler. 3 years after she was gone, my wife was still protecting me. And for the first time, I finally understood how much she loved me.